monarch for so many years, and her popularity was rapidly regained. She would suffer other losses from within her own family in the close years that followed. In 2002, the death of her sister Margaret. Then the passing of that old royal warrior, her mum, known universally as the Queen Mother. All in the very year when Elizabeth was celebrating her Golden Jubilee. 50 years on the throne. A moment marked by wonderful British whimsy. Great ceremonies one day, street parties the next. There is no doubt Queen Elizabeth has wielded a subtle influence, a hint here and there on the way her country has been run. And she has played a role on the wider political arena, quietly working to ease apartheid in South Africa. Nelson Mandela defied protocol and fondly called her Elizabeth when they met. And the Queen helped heal the decades-long rift between Britain and the Irish Republic when she visited Dublin in 2011. Even immersed in all the royal trappings, she had the knack of putting people at ease with her quiet humour and curiosity. And she also harboured a great sense of mischief.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Playing herself alongside Daniel Craig as James Bond in a short film for the opening of the London Olympics in 2012. Before we knew it, she had added 10 years to her reign, celebrations marking her Diamond Jubilee. 60 years on the throne. A royal record tumbled, Elizabeth overtaking Queen Victoria as the longest reigning British monarch. But in her 90s, she remained sharp-eyed, ready to remind her grandson to stand at the proper moment, ready to make sure the family went to church. There were still speed bumps, however, for the Queen to navigate. There was great alarm over the dubious friendship her second son, Andrew, had with American sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein's death did nothing to clear the air. Andrew only making it worse with a train wreck television interview.
I don't believe it's been damaging to the Queen at all. Has to me.
Hard on the heels of that upheaval came the Mexit ultimatum. Harry and Meghan jumping ship, resigning as senior royals, planning to split their time between Britain, Canada and California.
I took matters into my own hands. It was like, I need to do this for my family.
The strain on the brotherly bond between William and Harry that had endured so much must have caused the Queen such great distress.
Yeah, maybe the half-in, half-out model does work.
It took the death of Prince Philip to bring the family back together. Even if age-old traditions had to give way to a new custom, social distancing, the Queen alone in the royal pew at Philip's funeral. The loss of her husband was a time to reflect on their long time together, the moments of accomplishment and celebration, and the challenges overcome. Rarely displaying public emotion, she could be excused for perhaps feeling she had fulfilled the course she charted the day she was crowned. And satisfied, no doubt, that those who will follow her, Charles with his renewed popularity, William, who transcends tradition and youth, and the royal boy George will continue doing the job so ably carried out for so long by Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah, what an extraordinary leader, what an extraordinary life. These are live shots now outside Buckingham Palace. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are making their way there to pay their respects. It is what, around quarter to eight London time right now. You could imagine that those crowds will only swell to larger numbers over the coming hours as people mourn the loss of Queen Elizabeth?
It was a little over an hour ago that the traditional announcement was placed on the palace gates, which was just before 4 a.m. our time that happened, which is all part of the tradition of what happens when the monarch passes. But by that point, there were already many, many people outside the gates because we knew from Queen Elizabeth's doctors that she had taken a turn and the family had made their way to Balmoral.
It's happened. I mean, we all saw her just a couple of days ago, right? And we all wondered if she was, she had a couple of marks on her hand. And there was speculation then that she may have not been in great health, but it was more mobility. So even though she's 96, it still came as a shock this morning when we found out. And that's only been...
That's the final photograph taken of the Queen there. That was when she was meeting the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, 2 days ago. So, I mean, I think when we saw that, as you said, we remarked on her hands, didn't we, that they were bruised. But she looked quite well, even though she was frail. She looked quite well in that picture. So, has obviously taken a turn sometime after that point.
So, this has only happened in the last couple of hours, and already there has been a huge reaction around the world as the news of her passing fanned out across the globe. Also, just in the last few moments, Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, has released a fairly lengthy statement on her life. He says, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, an historic reign and a long life devoted to duty, family, faith and service has come to an end. The government and the people of Australia offer our deepest condolences to the royal family, who are grieving for a beloved mother, grandmother and great-grandmother, the person whom for so long was their greatest inner strength.
Australian hearts go out to the people of the United Kingdom who mourn today, knowing they will feel they have lost part of what makes their nation whole. There is comfort to be found in Her Majesty's own words, grief is the price we pay for love. This is a loss we all feel, for few have known a world without Queen Elizabeth II. In her 7 remarkable decades on the throne, Her Majesty was a rare and reassuring constant amidst rapid change. Through the noise and tumult of the years, she embodied and exhibited a timeless decency and an enduring calm.
From the moment the young princess became queen, shouldering the mighty weight of the institution into which she was born, Her Majesty made dedication to duty and service above self the hallmark of her reign. She celebrated our good times. She stood with us in the bad, happy and glorious but steadfast too. In particular, we recall the sympathy and personal kindness she extended to Australians afflicted by tragedy and disaster. Throughout it all, she was a monarch who let her humanity show, performing her duty with fidelity, integrity and humour. In this, she was supported so long and so lovingly by the late Prince Philip, her strength and stay for 73 years. And from her famous first trip to Australia, the only reigning sovereign to ever visit, it was clear Her Majesty held a special place in her heart for Australia. 15 more tours before cheering crowds in every part of our country confirmed the special place she held in ours. As monarch for more than half the life of our federation, the relationship between Australia and Britain matured and evolved throughout Her Majesty's reign. The Queen greeted each and every change with understanding, good grace and an abiding faith in the Australian people's good judgment. This was the deft and diplomatic way she bound the diversity of the modern Commonwealth, nations around the world who will mourn her passing.
Today marks the end of an era, the close of the second Elizabethan age. This time of mourning will pass, but the deep respect and warm regard in which Australians always held Her Majesty will never fade. May she rest in eternal peace. That the statement released in the past few moments by our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
Those shots outside Buckingham Palace, I mean, they're just incredible, this support now that is growing there. This woman was loved, and it will be shown in the coming hours, the coming days, the coming weeks. A man who did love her too, Dickie Arbiter, worked with her as the Queen's press secretary from 1988 to 2000.
And he joins us now live from London. Dickie, I know it is a difficult day for everyone in the UK and around the world, and for you personally, you're very close.
It is difficult, but one's got to be pragmatic. The Queen was incredibly pragmatic. And it's interesting, isn't it? Prince Philip died on the 9th of April 2021. The Queen died today, the 9th of September 2022, 17 months later. I don't think she ever really recovered from the loss of Prince Philip. He was a liege man for 73 years. And when you've lived that long with somebody, depended on them, depended on each other, it was a tremendous loss. We saw this lonely figure sitting, because of social distancing during the COVID epidemic, of sitting alone at the time of his funeral. She did cut a lonely figure. We've seen her gradually, unfortunately, deteriorate, getting very frail, having mobility issues. And we saw that delightful picture a couple of days ago, 48 hours ago, of her meeting her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss. What a difference 48 hours makes.
Dickie, I wonder if you can shed any light on what just happened in the last couple of hours, and also just the process of what will be taking place behind closed doors. Let's start with just what happened, first of all, with who was around her as she passed.
Well, in the last few hours of her life, the doctors were there, and the statement was released just before lunch today, saying there were concerns for her health, and although she was comfortable. It was that triggered the family descending on Balmoral. King Charles III and Queen Camilla were really just down the road at Burke Hall, which is his Scottish home, given to him by his late grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who died in 2002. So he would have rushed there pretty quickly. The rest of the family would have headed towards Northolt Airport, just outside of London, boarded a plane to Aberdeen's Dice Airport, and then an hour's drive from there. What is quite interesting, and I find extraordinary, that Prince Harry wasn't on the same aircraft and making his own way there, and probably arrived, if indeed he has arrived, after the death of his grandmother, which is very sad in the circumstances. What will be happening now? Well, there is a very clear, laid out funeral plan. It was written years ago. When I was at Buckingham Palace from 1988 to 2000, I had a hand of rewriting some of it, sort of modernising it. And it would have been approved by late Queen Elizabeth II. So that'll be putting into operation by the Lord Chamberlain's office at Buckingham Palace. There will be, the next 24 hours, her coffin will stay at Balmoral in order to give estate workers and locals an opportunity of bidding farewell to their boss, after which it will then come down south to London and will probably go to either Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, the respective throne rooms, where it'll stay for about 3 or 4 days before moving to Westminster Hall for the lying in state, where the public will be able to file past and pay their respects before the 9th day, when the coffin will be taken to Westminster Abbey for the funeral service, and thence on to St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, for the interment. So it's a very lengthy period, a very long period, and a very sad period when people will be able to express their emotions whatever way. I believe that Australians will be doing the same. She'll be sadly missed by Australians, by members of the Commonwealth. We've got to remember that her 21st birthday speech, if you remember that, I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to you and the great imperial family to which we all belong. Well, we don't have an imperial family anymore, but we certainly do have a Commonwealth family. And the statement that she made, the whole of her life, meant the whole of her life until she drew last breath. And she remained Queen Elizabeth II until she drew last breath this afternoon at Balmoral Castle.
Beautiful words, Dickie.
It's and just that emotion that you say, I mean, that will be felt right around the world. And I know it was her Jubilee celebrations. Even then, she signed off "Your Servant," and that was her, wasn't it? Right, as you say, until her very last breath, it was about service to her country, and she was That one constant over 7 decades of extreme change, that stability, and people use words like steadfast to describe her, which are quite old-fashioned words, but that was her, wasn't it?
Ali, you've said it all. It was about duty. It was about continuity. It was about commitment to the people. Who can forget those words that she uttered during the start of the COVID pandemic on the 5th of April 2020, in which she said, and you said earlier on, we will see our friends again. We will see our families again. We will meet again. Very stoic, very much for the people, very much person who gave confidence to the people. They looked to her. When there was a time of celebration, they went to Buckingham Palace, they looked to her. When it was time of tragedy, they looked to her. And who can forget the Platinum Jubilee, the appearances on the balcony after trooping the colour. She didn't go to it, but she appeared on the balcony to a roar of spectators, all the way from Buckingham Palace, all the way up to Trafalgar Square, almost a quarter of a mile. And then the Platinum Jubilee itself, when she appeared on the balcony. And that wonderful sequence, you mentioned the opening of the Olympic Games and the sequence with James Bond, but something that overtook that completely was that wonderful sequence with Paddington Bear and the drumming on the cup and saucer to the beat of the drums, We Will Rock You, that got picked up by the Royal Marines drummers outside the palace. She was a wonderful woman, and people will remember for her commitment, her duty, her love of people, her love of the Commonwealth, her love of Australia, of the realm states. Nobody can forget that, and nobody can take that away.
Well said again, Dickie. I wonder if you can also just elaborate a little on just how this all happens. Obviously, King Charles III is now the reigning monarch, but how does that happen after she passed, and what is the order of events there?
Well, there's a tradition. There were complaints, for example, at the time of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, there wasn't a flag flying at half-mast. Now, when Queen Victoria moved in there in 1837, the only flag that ever flew was the Royal Standard. And there was never any other flag. So when the sovereign wasn't in residence, the Royal Standard came down and the flag wasn't replaced. The sovereign never dies. We have the Queen's death today. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. When the King died in February 1952, the King is dead. Long live the King. So it's a smooth segue transition from one reign to the next. Yes, he will be proclaimed from St James's Palace tomorrow and throughout the land, but he does automatically become king, because that is how the monarchy works in the UK and has worked for over 1,000 years.
So it passes immediately, and it almost passes invisibly, doesn't it? But then, I mean, you knew Charles, or you know Charles. I mean, behind closed doors, yes, he's lost his mother, but to now step into those shoes and to be the reigning monarch, and I mean, I think he's the oldest heir apparent, or the longest serving heir apparent, and he becomes the oldest king at 73. What would be happening in the discussions he'd be having and feeling?
Well, he will realise, I mean, he's known his destiny since the day he was born, or the day that he was able to understand what his destiny was all about. He will be devastated by the loss of his mother. He's just kind of got over the loss of his father last year, and now 17 months later, his mother has died. He was very close to her, despite what various reports have come out over the intervening years. He will feel that she's a very hard act to follow. She was very pragmatic. She was very straight. She wasn't involved politically, but she was able to have her weekly audiences with prime ministers, 15 of them. Well, Liz Truss never had an audience, but she did have a meeting when she was appointed and kissed hands 2 days ago. But she was able to have these meetings with prime ministers, knowing that whatever was discussed, nothing went beyond the 4 walls of her audience room. And as far as the people were concerned, she was a queen of the people. You mentioned earlier about the walkabout. She invented the modern walkabout. Let's not move away from King George V and Queen Mary, who actually invented the walkabout during the First World War. They visited troops convalescing in hospitals. They visited various areas that were bombed by the Axis powers. So they invented the walkabout, but the Queen very much invented the modern walkabout, and people were appreciative of that. To actually have the Queen stop and talk to them. That had never happened before. And it was innovative for the Queen to suddenly be in immediate contact with the people that she was reigning over. And that was quite a move forward. When her mother died, and the Queen has always evolved during the course of the reign, she always used to wear sort of floral print dresses, rather dowdy, I think most people would say. But when her mother died, she suddenly transformed into bright colours. She always said, I have to be seen to be believed. And my goodness, when she transformed after the death of her mother into emerald green, turquoise blue, cerise red, canary yellow, you could see her from the moon. So she really was seen to be believed. She will be desperately missed, not just by the people of the United Kingdom. She'll be missed by the realm states, which Australia is one of them, and I'm sure many Australians will miss. Yes, there is a Republican undercurrent there. There's a Republican undercurrent here in the UK, but people will miss her. People will miss her at the Commonwealth. They've already missed her at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meetings, of which King George III, King Charles III now presides over. So she will be a figure that's missed. She's been around on the throne for 70 years. She's met every president of the United States except LBJ. She never got to meet him. She's met every world leader. Some of them have died years ago. Some of them are not. I mean, Gorbachev was probably the last world leader she met, who died only last week. So she will be sadly missed. And the king will find it a very hard act to follow, but he will do things differently, because we know, we being the globe knows, his thinking on climate change, his thinking on the environment, on education, all sorts of issues. He'll have to rein in, because he can't voice opinions as king in much the same way as he did as Prince of Wales, but we already know what his opinions are. And these opinions will then be taken up by Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, who will ultimately, in the fullness of time, become the next Prince of Wales.
Dickie, we're looking now at live shots outside Buckingham Palace. It's hard to fathom a more universally loved leader. You're going to see a huge outpouring of emotion there. You're saying that Balmoral may not lend itself to such an outpouring of grief and celebration of life, but in the next couple of hours, I suppose the King will make some address of some kind. He's already released a statement, a very pointed and quite emotional statement. But it's hard to fathom them not actually coming and doing something, or maybe it's tomorrow. But either way, there's going to be tens of thousands of people around the clock outside Buckingham Palace now. As I said before, this woman was loved.
He will make a statement ultimately. I'm not sure what broadcast crews are up at Balmoral. I'm sure they've all scrambled up there. So there will be something coming from him. But I think for the time being, he needs to be left alone in his grief. And in the fullness of time, probably tomorrow or even the next day, he will come out and he will say something. Because he's very good in front of the camera. He's very good at doing pieces to camera, as his mother was. And he will want people to know about her last hours, about him, and about his reign. He might not give much away, but he will come out and say something. It is a difficult time, particularly when, as I said earlier, you've lost your father in April 2021 and your mother in September 2022. To lose two parents in the space of 17 months is very hard for any family, irrespective of what your age is. And Charles is 73, going to be 74 in November. But yes, we will hear from him, because he knows that he's got to say something. And he won't be backwards in coming forwards in doing that.
Dickie, I did notice too that as the people gathered to mourn the passing of the Queen outside Buckingham Palace, a rainbow appeared, which I don't know, I just think that's something that's just a quite lovely thing to note. But it was the BBC, it was 3:32 a.m. our time. which announced the passing of the Queen. Do we know, because it did seem to happen so quickly, do we know if her family made it in time to say their farewells?
The majority of the family did make it. I'm not sure whether Prince Harry made it because he decided to go under independent means while the rest of the family got on a plane at Northolt. The King and the Queen were at Burke Hall, which is just down the road from Balmoral, so they were able to get there pretty early once the bulletin had been issued, and probably even before, because they would have been called by the private secretary, Sir Edward Young, that the doctors are about to issue a statement and he should get over there, and he would have got over there. The rest of the family arrived in the course of the afternoon. The Duke of Cambridge came alone because the Duchess stayed behind because her children's first day at school, which nobody would begrudge that. The Earl and Countess of Wessex were also on the flight. Princess Anne was already up there, as was the Duke of York. So Prince Harry, I'm not sure whether he's arrived. He was going independently. That remains to be seen. A great pity that he didn't make it before the death of his grandmother. That would have been the right gesture. But you know, who knows the way they operate.
You mentioned Camilla then, and what she has been through an enormous amount in her life, hasn't she? She now finds herself with the King, obviously King Charles. You mentioned that she's Queen Consort. You also said, how will she be referred to? And just take us inside her life now.
Well, she would be referred to by her name. Her name is Camilla. She will be referred to as Queen Camilla in much the same way as in the reign before the Queen, it was King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. So in this reign, new reign now, it'll be King Charles III and Queen Camilla. Oh. That's how she'll be referred to. She'll be very good. She's been terrific when Charles was Prince of Wales in supporting him and encouraging him, in reining him in when he sort of looked as though he was losing it, which not very often. She's very good with people. When she talks to somebody, she gives them quality time. She looks at them, she looks them in the eye and talks to them, not over their shoulder to see who might be more important. But she does give the individual quality time before moving on. She's very good at charity work. She's very good at osteoporosis, which her mother died of. And she's been very innovative in children's literature, in getting children to read books, and even got an Instagram site in which she reads books in the hope that children are going to follow suit. So she is going to be a tremendous support to King Charles. She's going to be tremendous support to the country. And I think they'll do a terrific job. As I said a moment ago, a hard act to follow, Queen Elizabeth II, but in their own way, they will do it. Mm.
Dickie, can I ask you, when did you realise that there was something seriously wrong and that she had perhaps passed? Because it's very rare for her doctors to release any medical information about the Queen. They always keep that very quiet. So when they did that earlier today to say that she was comfortable but had taken a turn, was that at that point it was very clear that, that she had passed or was going to?
I'm sorry to have to say this and admit to this, but when the mobility episodes were first announced at the end of last year, I had a sneaky suspicion that the Queen would not last 2022. We've seen her come back and forth. She did quite a few things over Christmas while she was up at Sandringham, and she looked terrific. And then she did a few things after Christmas. She missed the service at St George's Chapel at Easter, something that she never missed before. She was at Prince Philip's funeral, which was a very sad occasion for her. But every time we'd seen her, she looked to be becoming frailer and frailer. And there's only so much a body can take. And then we got increasing mobility episodes where, yes, she was going to do something and then pulling out at the last moment. Prince Philip's Thanksgiving service comes to mind. Various other engagements. Remembrance Day, something that she never pulled out of. She was always there because she was the last serving head of state, the only serving head of state who actually served in the military during World War II, albeit in the ATS. So there were things that were that were actually booked for her to do, but she pulled out at the last moment, much to the disappointment of a lot of people, more so disappointment to her that she wasn't able to do it. And every time we saw her, and particularly the last time we saw her, which was a couple of days ago when she met Liz Truss and asked her to form a government, she looked very, very frail. You mentioned earlier her hands were blue. That's as a result of the lack of oxygen, the right oxygen getting into the bloodstream. And it was very, very noticeable. But she did look frail, and anybody who had any doubts would have wondered then, it's not a case of if, but when. And she never really recovered, did she? She cancelled the Privy Purse, cancelled the Privy Council meeting. At that meeting, the new cabinet ministers would have been sworn into their jobs. That was cancelled. And then today, the medics announced that there was grave concern. And as soon as they use words like grave concern, you know that something is seriously wrong. Yeah. And they weren't wrong, they were right. And this afternoon came the news that she had died peacefully.
Do you know,
with her family around her, which was good.
We'll come back to you in a second, Diggy, but just on that, the new Prime Minister and those photos, fateful photos from just a couple of days ago, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, spoke a short time ago. Here's what she had to say.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
That was Liz Truss, the brand new Prime Minister of Great Britain. Already the country facing enormous obstacles, and her job just got a little bit more difficult. Tough days ahead. Tributes are also pouring in from leaders around the world this morning. This from the President of the United States, Joe Biden. He says, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was more than a monarch. She defined an era. We send our deepest condolences to the royal family, who are not only mourning their queen, but their dear mother, grandmother and great-grandmother. Her legacy will loom large in the pages of British history and in the story of our world.
And this from Bill Clinton: my thoughts and prayers are with the royal family and all the people Her Majesty inspired throughout her lifetime of service. While Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has also just spoken.
It is with the deepest of sorrow that we learn today of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was our Queen for almost half of Canada's existence, and she had an obvious, deep, and abiding love and affection for Canadians. I'm having trouble believing that my last sit-down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. Canada is in mourning. She was one of my favorite people in the world, and I will miss her so.
Whoa, that was emotional, wasn't
Canada's Prime Minister there, Justin Trudeau.
Let's go now to Associate Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Camilla Tominey, who joins us live from London. Camilla, gee, I tell you what, I mean, even though she's 96, it was still a shock how quickly this happened.
I know, I'm just watching Justin Trudeau there, and I'm sure, like you guys, and indeed Today viewers, just feel so devastated by this news. Obviously, professionally, you prepare for this, and at 96, it's not a tragedy like losing Diana, Princess of Wales. But I think when you've had a figure who has been so stalwart in her public service, such a feature of British and international life, to then lose that person, who there isn't anybody on earth really that doesn't remember a moment of the Queen being woven into the fabric of what it is to be British. I mean, she is historically one of the greatest Britons that have ever lived.
Yeah.
And therefore, to now contemplate life without her, I mean, the world seems a darker place, doesn't it?
It does. I agree with you completely. I mean, we're seeing the crowds and seeing the grief outside of Buckingham Palace, and you can feel that wave of emotion stretching not just from there, but around the world.
Absolutely. And of course, that's entirely fitting for a woman who dedicated her life from her 20s till death at 96 to the service of others. And someone who, as well, has that rare thing in public life, which is to be selfless and not unnecessarily want to attract attention to herself, and to be that reassuring and stabilizing figure. I mean, even towards the end of her reign, if we think back to seminal moments like her "We'll meet again" speech during coronavirus, I mean, nobody else could deliver that address except somebody of her wisdom and experience. And the effect that has on the public, there's this sense, isn't there, and you'll feel it as well in Australia and across the Commonwealth, you know, you feel safer because the Queen was on the throne, you know. Just the sight and the presence of her. Oh, it's okay. The Queen's got this. Even though she wasn't necessarily present throughout the Platinum Jubilee, she bookended it because of her health problems. You just feel that the world is a better place with her in it and a worse one with her not in it.
Well, it was that sense of reassurance, I think, that she gave people, wasn't it? But look, it's coming. You're at the BBC there this morning, the national broadcaster. It's coming up to 2 hours since her death was announced. It was at 3:32 a.m. I was watching the BBC this morning when they made that announcement. And just talk me through the reaction there at that moment when it was confirmed that Queen Elizabeth II had died.
Well, to be fair, Ali, I was in the Telegraph newsroom at the time, and I've just moved here now to do broadcasting for you guys on the BBC this evening. I mean, you're prepped for it, and obviously when you're in the Royal Press Pack, you get a little bit of warning. But the entire newsroom fell completely silent. We all obviously then tuned into the official announcement on the television. The national anthem played, and I've not really known anything like it. Because, like you guys, you're covering it professionally, but of course we're all personally invested in this story. People used to ask me, who's your favourite royal? And it's the Queen. I mean, the Queen was an absolute legend in my lifetime, and therefore you're covering it as a story, but you're always also covering it as a human being. And I think, we knew the signs weren't looking good to have family members flying there. I mean, when the Prince of Wales took a helicopter from Dumfries House, which isn't far from Balmoral, of course you're worried. And then you're also thinking, but she's 96. And I just want to reflect as well. I mean, this is a woman who, despite her health problems, was still front and centre of the prime ministerial handover only on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That is what we're talking about here. Somebody so dedicated to duty that despite her own discomfort, carries out that hugely significant constitutional role, despite the fact she's already working 2 decades beyond retirement age. And she wouldn't have wanted it any other way, may I add, to be working until the end. And also, I take comfort, as I'm sure everybody who is absorbing this news slowly this morning, for you guys, take comfort in the fact that she was at Balmoral. She loved Balmoral. She loved her summers in Scotland. She spent her childhood there. She recovered and tried to get over her grief from the Duke of Edinburgh at Balmoral, and her family raced to be by her side. Just as somebody, with family, we can all identify with that, the need to be close. The Queen as head of state, but ultimately to her family as granny.
And you could see that. You could see the car when it arrived at Balmoral to be with the Queen, and you had Prince William was driving, Prince Andrew was in the front, but you had Edward and Sophie in the back. And it was that still shot, I think, of Sophie's face, which really gave us the first indication of just how bad things were, because she was incredibly close to the Queen.
Yes, she was, and ever more so actually following the death of the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret in 2002. Actually, Sophie, as her daughter-in-law, sort of became a close confidant. And the royals regarded the Queen, obviously, in a different way on a familial level, but I think regarded her as a legend within the family as the public did from outside. So whenever I interview other members of the royal family, and you used to mention the Queen, I only recently interviewed Sophie and Edward, actually, for the Telegraph magazine. Their eyes would light up when talking about the Queen. It's a pleasure for them and an honour for them to know her and be a member of her family. And also it's an interesting time now with regard to transition, this sense of already talking about King Charles III and how difficult it is for him to now manage his constitutional responsibilities and balance that with the loss of his mother, and also having only recently lost his father as well.
Camilla, it is coming up to 5:30 here in Australia, and in the last couple of hours, word is filtering out across the world. We've seen the vision outside of Buckingham Palace as we speak, tens of thousands gathering there. But this was the moment the BBC broke the news to the world.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace has just issued this statement. It says the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow.
We have some very important news. Buckingham Palace has just announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. She was 96 years old. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and the world's oldest head of state. Her eldest son and heir, Charles, the former Prince of Wales, is now the King.
Camilla, for those who are just waking up to this news, can you just outline for us, provide some level of detail about those last couple of hours and about what happened after that?
Well, I think it's fair to say that this morning there were suggestions, and there have been for the last few days, that perhaps the Queen wasn't in the best of health because she was forced to cancel an online meeting with Privy Councillors last night. And that came after she had pulled out of the Braemar Games, which is a fixture in the summer calendar that she's always really enjoyed. And of course, provisions were made for her to carry out the kissing of hands ceremony, which is the image you can see here. This was just before she met the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, after she had accepted Boris Johnson's resignation on Tuesday. The statement then came through from Buckingham Palace at about 12:30 that royal doctors were concerned about the Queen's health and that she was being placed under medical supervision. Almost simultaneously, we had a scene that played out in the House of Commons where Nadhim Zahawi, who is a cabinet minister, was seen entering the House of Commons while Liz Truss was giving a statement about her provisions for the energy crisis. He handed her a piece of paper. There was then a brief discussion. There was also a discussion with the Speaker of the House of Commons, which I think set alarm bells ringing that something was amiss. We then had a period of around 5 hours where we didn't really hear much, not many updates, but at the same time heard news of family members, the Queen's children, and indeed in turn her grandchildren, making their way to Balmoral. At around the time that the note was passed to Liz Truss, we then understood that the Prince of Wales, now King Charles III, made his way by helicopter by the Queen's flight from Dumfries House to Balmoral at around noon, 12:30, with Camilla, now the Queen Consort, shortly followed by other members of the family who were convened to Balmoral by private jet. Prince William, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, that's Prince Edward and his wife Sophie, travelling together with the Duke of York. We then knew that they were in position and were awaiting an announcement. That announcement that the Queen had died came at 6:30. We also know that the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, was en route to Balmoral. He has arrived at Balmoral in the last half an hour. He wasn't there before the announcement was given by the palace at around 2 hours ago, London time, around 6:30. We are treating this day, there's a procedure now to follow, Carl and Alice. So we have 10 days of mourning and we have a run up now to a state funeral. We count that from tomorrow. So we still are awaiting confirmation from Buckingham Palace as to the precise timings. But I'm working on the proviso that the funeral should take place a week on Monday. So that would be the 19th of September. Again, that's not confirmed. But as, of course, preparations have been in place for some time for this eventuality, there is a sense to which we can plan the next 10 very difficult days for this country and for the Commonwealth and the wider world.
Well said, Camilla. We'll come back to you shortly. It's 5:30 on the east coast of Australia, 3:30 in the west. You're watching a special edition of Today. Breaking news, the Queen has died. Elizabeth II passes away at her beloved home in Balmoral at 96. Britain's longest ever monarch.
A life devoted to public duty, a 70-year reign defined by service, working right to the end, meeting her 15th Prime Minister just days ago.
Charles declared king. Camilla named Queen Consort as the second Elizabethan era ends. King Charles III issuing an emotional statement moments ago.
Australia farewells our Queen. Tears and tributes for the monarch who was a constant thread through our lives and a constantly changing world.
This morning, we'll hear from the King about the next days of commemoration as the world farewells Queen Elizabeth II. Today, Friday, the 9th of September, 2022.
That my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
I did but see her passing by, and yet I loved her till I died.
Better days will return. We will meet again.
Live across Australia, this is a special edition of Today. The death of Queen Elizabeth II, with Carl Stefanovic and Alison Langdon.
Good morning, folks, and welcome to this special edition of Today. We're bringing you the sad news that the Queen, the longest-serving British monarch, has died, aged 96. This is a live shot of Buckingham Palace as we go to air, where thousands of people are gathering to mourn the end of a reign and the end of an era.
This is how it unfolded. At 9:30 last night, the palace issued this statement. Following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral.
Within 2 hours, the royal family rushed into action. Prince William, Andrew and Edward flying into Scotland. Charles, Camilla and Anne were already there. The media watched on as cars carrying royals sped to Balmoral, signalling the truth we just didn't want to hear somehow.
And at 3:32 a.m, the palace issued this statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow.
Half an hour after that, this from the new King, Charles III. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held.
It was only on Tuesday that we saw the Queen greeting the new British Prime Minister at Balmoral. Barely 3 days later, we are mourning the loss of an exceptional woman. People across Australia are just learning the news of the Queen's death. And here's how people on the streets of Sydney are remembering her.
I'm pretty sad because she was a decent woman. She's a lovely person. She held herself through wars and everything like that, so wow.
She's an icon, and I guess you always have to be a little bit sad when someone, you know, of that magnitude dies.
How do you feel learning the news this morning?
It's very sad, yeah. It's a sad day for everyone. She became part of everyone's life. Yeah, very sad.
7 decades.
Yes,
right.
It's a long time, a long time.
What does it mean for Australia now?
Who knows?
The Queen, have you heard?
Just heard then.
No.
Yeah, I woke up to that news. Terrible news. Yeah, no, she was great. She was great. Loved her.
I was sad because I used to look after the Queen. I used to be the bodyguard for the Queen, for the Irish Guards, based in Victoria Barracks here, in Windsor. 2012, I took part in the Jubilee, I think the Jubilee. Yeah.
So did you meet the Queen?
Yeah.
What was she like?
She's good. Yeah.
How would you describe her?
I think she's a great leader. Yeah. I think all over the world.
I thought, my goodness, what a legacy of service over an extraordinary period of time, right from time that none of us know, and that consistency in leadership.
We know that the Queen's 4 children and Prince William were by her side when she passed. And in the last few moments, we have noticed that Prince Harry has arrived at Balmoral. Sadly, he wasn't there for the passing of his beloved grandmother.
Looks like he's alone there too, going into Balmoral. It's a difficult day when anyone, a member of your family, dies. For him, doubly difficult, I would have thought. You know, we know that she's 96, but when I heard the news this morning, I was still kind of shocked. I mean, 2 days ago, we saw her with the new British Prime Minister, and then this morning when I woke up to all these messages, my phone was lighting up, and now since I've been on air, I've had messages from around the world, friends, family who are around the world, just going, I'm so sad. I mean, this woman touched people and was an extraordinary leader, we know that, but she just had a personal touch that I think was quite extraordinary. Apart from being a great leader, a consistent leader, we all felt like we loved her.
I sort of feel it's unnerving
her passing, like this time has passed, and she's been this sort of unshakable constant in our lives as many things have changed. And yes, she's 96, so as Camilla Tominey was pointing out earlier, it's not that it's a tragic passing at that age, but it just feels like something has changed.
You know, the other thing is, I mean, these are the sort of scenes that we saw when Diana passed, right? And we know how loved Diana was. You watch this in the coming hours, days. You watch that mural there, the flower mural outside on the footsteps of Buckingham Palace will grow and grow and grow, and people are already making that journey there, and they will from around the world to pay their respects to the Queen. That is going to be a centre place of love and of heartfelt thanks for a life of service, and it was an extraordinary life.
Very few people have touched the world as she has.
These are Australia's very personal memories, now tucked away. Moments we will never see again. Of the Queen as we got to know her, here on our own soil. Memories that stretch back over 16 visits to Australia, from the first in 1954.
I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till I die.
To her last in 2011, when she was as popular as ever, drawing enormous crowds. When Australia seemed to realise that perhaps she would not be passing by this way again. We certainly made the most of it. The Queen had visited, over more than half a century, great areas of Australia. Every capital city. Seen us at work.
A model of the completed plant at Elizabeth helps Her Majesty to gain an impression of the magnitude of the establishment.
And at play.
Among the events were surf races between teams from Australia and New Zealand.
And witnessed our memorable moments. She was a young queen when she first came here, just 28. The first time a reigning British monarch had visited Australia. The reception was momentous.
And here they are at last, amongst us, moving in triumphal progress through each city in its turn. Sydney first, boisterous, open-handed Sydney, painting the big town red, white and blue.
And that visit cemented a long mutual friendship.
Standing at last on Australian soil, on this spot that is the birthplace of the nation, I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you, and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
All through the years that have followed, Australia has watched from half a world away the great moments of the Queen's reign, sometimes relishing the regal splendour, sometimes witnessing the upheavals that from time to time have rippled through her royal life.
And the royal family there, immediately behind the coffin.
Elizabeth was born in 1926. Her father, the Duke of York, was second son of King George V. With George's death, and then the abdication of elder son Edward VIII, Elizabeth's father was suddenly king. The direction of her own life, as heir to the crown, suddenly changed direction dramatically.
Queen's amused consternation when Princess Elizabeth drops a stitch.
Her upbringing was something incomparable to how today's young royals are raised. She had private tuition in constitutional history, learnt French from governesses brought over from France, and was a girl guide in the Buckingham Palace Company, formed especially so she could make friends with girls her own age. Looking back now, it was all extraordinary. But if life seemed mapped out for her, Elizabeth would follow her own heart when it came to marriage. Philip was a minor prince of tangled European origins and Elizabeth's third cousin. Just before the outbreak of the Second World War, when she was only 13, she visited Dartmouth to review cadets of the Royal Navy. He was assigned her escort that day. They would then exchange letters through the war, when he was stationed on warships, while she was an army driver. They wed in 1947 and would have 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward. In 1952, Elizabeth and Philip were in Kenya when her father died. She was proclaimed Queen and crowned in Westminster Abbey in June 1953. Elizabeth soon charted the defining course of her reign. Buckingham Palace might be headquarters, the four corners of the Commonwealth, however, would be her constant home away from home. In that first visit to Australia in 1954, it's estimated 3/4 of our population turned out to see her.
Through the 6 heart cities of 6 great states.
Those early years as monarch saw her constantly on the move. The Pacific nations, Canada, the United States, Cyprus, India, Pakistan, Nepal. All that time she was also carrying out the great ceremonies of the British Crown, opening Parliament.
My government will continue to work to bring communities together and strengthen society.
Hosting visiting heads of state.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
And presiding over the military ceremonies that are at the very heart of London. And if the Queen seemed a merely symbolic commander-in-chief, she showed she had grit nonetheless. In 1981, as she took part in Trooping the Colour, a man in the crowd fired 6 blank shots as the Queen passed.
Field Marshal His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards.
Cool as can be, Elizabeth reined in her horse Burmese as it shied.
Burmese receiving a reassuring pat from Her Majesty the Queen, but he's a very experienced, wise old fellow.
The Queen never even glanced in the direction of the shots as the man was arrested.
They do strong stuff, you know.
Horses were undoubtedly her passion, whether riding in the grounds of Windsor Castle or wheeling home a winner at Ascot. The Queen, an avid horse breeder who loved a day at the races. But if she enjoyed life around the stables and in the saddle, it was a different job altogether, reining in her own family. She had been, in one way, responsible for letting them off the leash. It was the Queen, after all, who tried, sometimes with an almost naive and faltering charm, to make the royals seem more human. She introduced the royal walkabout.
She's professional, her ability to know how to move around, to who to speak to, and how to also engage with people, within a few split seconds of meeting them.
However, the next generation will be in the news for all the wrong reasons. When Charles met Diana, it was billed, inevitably by the tabloids, as the fairy tale romance. But even before they wed, there were ominous reservations.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
The wedding was a royal spectacle that only England can produce.
I, Charles Philip Arthur George.
I, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
In 2002, the death of her sister Margaret. Then the passing of that old royal warrior, her mum, known universally as the Queen Mother. All in the very year when Elizabeth was celebrating her Golden Jubilee. 50 years on the throne. A moment marked by wonderful British whimsy. Great ceremonies one day, street parties the next. There is no doubt Queen Elizabeth has wielded a subtle influence, a hint here and there on the way her country has been run. And she has played a role on the wider political arena, quietly working to ease apartheid in South Africa. Nelson Mandela defied protocol and fondly called her Elizabeth when they met. And the Queen helped heal the decades-long rift between Britain and the Irish Republic when she visited Dublin in 2011. Even immersed in all the royal trappings, she had the knack of putting people at ease, with her quiet humour and curiosity. And she also harboured a great sense of mischief.
Good evening, Sir Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Playing herself alongside Daniel Craig as James Bond in a short film for the opening of the London Olympics in 2012. Before we knew it, she had added 10 years to her reign, celebrations marking her Diamond Jubilee. 60 years on the throne. A royal record tumbled, Elizabeth overtaking Queen Victoria as the longest reigning British monarch. But in her 90s, she remained sharp-eyed, ready to remind her grandson to stand at the proper moment, ready to make sure the family went to church. There were still speed bumps, however, for the Queen to navigate. There was great alarm over the dubious friendship her second son, Andrew, had with American sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein's death did nothing to clear the air. Andrew only making it worse with a train wreck television interview.
I don't believe it's been damaging to the Queen at all. Has to me.
Hard on the heels of that upheaval came the Mexit ultimatum. Harry and Meghan jumping ship, resigning as senior royals, planning to split their time between Britain, Canada and California.
I took matters, and by that point I took matters into my own hands. It was like, I need to do this for my family.
The strain on the brotherly bond between William and Harry that had endured so much must have caused the Queen such great distress.
Yeah, maybe the half-in, half-out model does work.
It took the death of Prince Philip to bring the family back together. Even if age-old traditions had to give way to a new custom, social distancing, the Queen alone in the royal pew at Philip's funeral. The loss of her husband was a time to reflect on their long time together, the moments of accomplishment and celebration, and the challenges overcome. Rarely displaying public emotion, she could be excused for perhaps feeling she had fulfilled the course she charted the day she was crowned. And satisfied, no doubt, that those who will follow her, Charles with his renewed popularity, William, who transcends tradition and youth, and the royal boy George will continue doing the job so ably carried out for so long by Queen Elizabeth II. And these are live pictures now. Hundreds are gathering outside Windsor Castle to pay their respects. And joining us is former BBC royal correspondent Wesley Kerr in London. Wesley, we appreciate your time this morning. What a life and what a legacy.
Yes, I'm sad, but actually seeing that tribute made me feel a little bit happy and consoled, because I was at so many of the events that I just saw pictured. I remember that amazing bright green outfit that she wore for trooping a few years ago that we just saw. At the Jubilees, when central London would be thronged with crowds, as recently as this summer, to be very close to her, looking down when she made the balcony appearance. During trooping of the colour that day, that she wasn't present for the ceremony, and the flag didn't go up until about 10 minutes before she was due to appear. So she made the effort to come from Windsor that day. At the Chelsea Flower Show, which she's been going to since 1947, and she was comfortable this year because a buggy was provided, and she had such a happy time that day, going around for an hour, meeting many old friends, and she would know the names of the exhibitors. I've been lucky enough to meet her many times over the last 35 years, and I do have such happy memories. What an amusing person she was, full of energy and life. I know it's an odd thing to say today, but she couldn't have had this impact as, I think, arguably the most significant British person since really since the Second World War. You can look at obviously Churchill in the war, Thatcher since, but I think in terms of the image of the United Kingdom, in terms of actually world impact, I mean the Commonwealth, 7 countries when she joined, 7 countries when she became Queen, 56 now. And I think in Australia, you were talking about the impact, the 16 visits there. She's been Queen of Australia for more than half of your period as a Commonwealth. She was born in 8 years after the First World War. So, and So the energy with which she went about her duties, the immense hard work, but actually this amazing person that she was. And I think that actually she was motivated by a very deep religious faith. Until recently, she never ever missed church on Sunday. I've seen her driving herself to church at Windsor on a Sunday. I've seen her go to church in a sort of little hut in the rainforest in Guyana. So that was very important. But it was never about her. It was always about the service that she could give to the United Kingdom, to the Commonwealth, and to the causes that she espoused. And I think your obituary mentioned apartheid, and I think she was a very, very significant figure in the end of apartheid. Her first ever foreign tour was in 1947 with her parents, just before apartheid came in, and she really did become a close friend of Mandela. And one of her most joyful tours was the one to South Africa in the 90s. And I remember seeing her at the Albert Hall. Mandela got up to dance to some South African singers and looked at her, and she got up and made some moves. I mean, so able to relax. Once in Bermuda, I was filing my dispatch back to London after covering the visit that she and Philip had done, and they came into the room where they'd been listening in the corridor, and they waved like taking a bow. So there was an immense warmth and a real sense of connection. Yes, the most famous woman in the world. Yes, the most photographed person. Yes, the most travelled head of state in human history. But a truly wonderful person. And I think doing her best as well as mother and matriarch of the nation, actually doing her best with her family. And it's difficult to grow up in that family. And I just think it's a terrible loss today. And it actually was a bit of a shock, because 2 days ago there she was with the new Prime Minister saying goodbye to Boris as well, and she saw their spouses and joked a bit at that meeting. Yesterday a meeting was cancelled, but I think the end obviously came rather suddenly, and maybe that's a bit of a release, because Philip had a long painful illness. I suppose for her to go very quickly is perhaps something to be pleased about, but it's just catastrophic, I think, in a way I feel personally, that she's gone.
Wesley, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it, and evenings there in London of shock and sadness and celebration at the same time. They're coming in their tens of thousands in the dark and in the rain to mark the end of her reign, and this outpouring will just grow, won't it? Her loss and her leadership, I mean, they were both immense.
Oh, I think it's going to be huge, and I think it's going to grow over the next 10, 12 days. And the fact that she died in Scotland makes what's going to happen even more elaborate. With a journey across Scotland, which she loved. Scotland, of course. Her mother, of course, was Scottish. She really loved Scotland. So there'll be ceremonial in Edinburgh. Then there'll be, possibly a long train journey, 400 miles from Edinburgh to London. Then much ceremonial in London. And people are coming to all the palaces. I was at Windsor last week, in fact, and there was a strange sense of absence. And the garden that she walks the dogs in was a little bit neglected, in fact. We'd had the drought, and I thought, I wonder if they think she's never going to come back, whereas that garden had always kind of been perfect. There was an odd feeling in London today as I cycled across the royal parks, that even early afternoon, they'd been closed to traffic, which I thought was very interesting. I'll be at Buckingham Palace tomorrow, and I think, so it won't be like the death of Diana, which was a shock of a very beautiful young woman dying horribly. But I think it actually will be a more seismic event, I think, in the history of the United Kingdom. And I think that public grief will be immense. But I think we do welcome our new king. I think Charles III comes to the throne immensely well prepared as the 42nd monarch of this country since William the Conqueror in 1066. Oh. This is an institution with very, very deep roots.
I mean, he becomes king at the age of 73, which is so very different to his mother, who was thrust into that role when she was just 27. Wesley, we really appreciate your time and thoughts this morning. It is going to be a very big, long night in London, in fact, the next 10 days or so. I appreciate your time.
But in a way, he's been present throughout her reign as the heir to the throne. So there'll be a lot of continuity. And my sympathies to Australia. You've lost your queen as well.
I think it's being felt right across the country. Everyone waking up to the news this morning with a great deal of sadness. And that's the communication that we're all receiving here. And that's the feeling that we're getting right across this great nation about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Wesley, thank you so much. We'll come back to you a little bit later. We appreciate your time.
And we've just heard too from Governor-General David Hurley.
Good morning. It is my solemn duty to inform you that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has passed away on the 8th of September 2022 at Balmoral in the United Kingdom. I have informed the Prime Minister, and the Australian Government will advise on arrangements for national mourning and other arrangements in the coming days. I will have more to say concerning Her Majesty's reign in a national address this evening. But now I pass on our condolences to the members of the royal family. I join all Australians in mourning and reflecting on Her Majesty's tireless service. She was truly a remarkable person. As our Queen, she served our nation with distinction for more than 70 years. When I reflect on my own memories, and she was my Queen for my entire life, I think of Her Majesty's dignity and her compassion, her dedication and her work ethic, and her selfless and unwavering commitment to those to whom she served, to us. Her death will sadden all Australians and be felt around the world. As we mourn, we should also take inspiration and give thanks to the remarkable contribution Her Majesty has made. May she rest in peace. God save the King.
The Governor-General. It's coming up to 6 a.m. on the East Coast, 4 a.m. in the West. You're watching a special edition of Today. Breaking news, the Queen has died. Elizabeth II passes away at her beloved home in Balmoral at 96. Britain's longest ever monarch.
A life devoted to public duty, a 70-year reign defined by service, working right to the end, meeting her 15th Prime Minister just days ago.
Charles declared king. Camilla named Queen Consort as the second Elizabethan era ends. King Charles III issuing an emotional statement moments ago.
Australia farewells our Queen. Tears and tributes for the monarch who was a constant thread through our lives and a constantly changing world.
This morning we'll hear from the King about the next days of commemoration as the world farewells Queen Elizabeth II. Today, Friday, the 9th of September, 2022.
That my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
I did but see her passing by, and yet I loved her till I died.
Better days will return. We will meet again.
Live across Australia, this is a special edition of Today. The death of Queen Elizabeth II, with Carl Stefanovic and Alison Langdon.
Welcome to this special edition of Today on what is an historic morning. Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96. We are standing by to bring you a live address from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. This is a live shot of Windsor Castle, of Buckingham Palace as we go to air, where thousands are laying flowers to mark what is the end of an extraordinary era.
It certainly has been, and this is how it all unfolded. At about 9:30 last night, the Palace issued this statement. Following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral.
That was at 9:30 last night. Within 2 hours, the royal family rushed into action. Prince William, Andrew and Edward flying into Scotland. Charles, his wife Camilla and his sister Anne were already there. The media watched on as cars carrying royals sped to Balmoral, signalling the truth we didn't want to hear.
At 3:30, the palace released this statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow.
And half an hour later, this from the new King, Charles III. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held.
It was only on Tuesday that we saw the Queen greeting the new British Prime Minister at Balmoral. Barely 3 days later, we are mourning the loss of just an exceptional woman. The people of the UK are absolutely devastated.
You know, it's just a sad day for us all today. And we've all known just one Queen. She's a person we've always looked up to. Somehow, it's just a sad day. It's just a very, very sad day.
I've never been a royalist, so I don't know why I've been so affected by it. I literally only found out a few minutes ago, and before it happened, I didn't think I would be, but I really am, and I realised just how important she was.
And she pledged her life to this country, and she led this country with great reverence and duty and respect and honour, and I just don't know if there would be another like her.
Gee, it's a roar, isn't it? Really
Sums
raw.
up the emotion of a nation, doesn't it?
It does, and all around the world. Charles Croucher has been at Buckingham Palace this evening, London time. Charles, what is it like there?
Evening, Carl. It's so much sadness and so many people that have gathered, like the Queen has done so many times throughout her extraordinary time as the monarch. She brought people together, this time to mourn her passing. There were people, of course, from Britain, but also plenty of Australians there. There was sadness, there were tears.